जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्रजकाचार्य स्तोत्र सत अभय चरणारविंद भक्ति वेदांता स्वामी प्रभुपाद की जय। जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्रजकाचार्य स्तोत्र सत श्री श्रीमद् भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती ठाकुर गोस्वामी महाराज प्रभुपाद की जय। इस्कॉन फाउंडराचार्य बीबीटी फाउंडराचार्य श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय। निताय गौर प्रेमानंदी। All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga. So Hare Krishna, we will be reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 1, Questions by Vidura. And today we have text 14. Iti uchivamस्तत्र सुयोधनेन प्रावर्धकोपस्फुरितधरेण असत्कृता सत्स्पृहणीया शिलाः शतसकर्णानुजासो बलेन इति उचिवांस्तत्र सुयोधनेन प्रावर्धकोपस्फुरितधरेण असत्कृता सत्स्पृहणीया शिलाः शतसकर्णानुजासो बलेन इति उचिवांस्तत्र सुयोधनेन प्रावर्धकोपस्फुरितधरेण असत्कृता सत्स्पृहणीया शिलाः शतसकर्णानुजासो बलेन इति उचिवांस्तत्र सुयोधनेन प्रावृद्धकोपस्फुरितधरेण असत्कृता सत्स्पृहणीया शिलाः शतसकर्णानुजासो बलेन इति उचिवांस्तत्र सुयोधनेन प्रवृद्धकोपस्फुरितधरेण असत्कृता सत्स्पृहणीया शिलाः शतसकर्णानुजासो बलेन इति उचिवांस्तत्र सुयोधनेन प्रावृद्धकोपस्फुरितधरेण असत्कृता सत्स्पृहणीया शिलाः शतसकर्णानुजासो बलेन इति उचिवांस्तत्र सुयोधनेन प्रावृद्धकोपास्फुरितधरेण हसत्कृता सत्स्पृहणीयशिला सताशकर्णानुजसो बलेन. Mataji, please. Uchivam satra suyodanena pravruddhakopa spurita dharena asatkrita satsprahniya sila shata sakarnanujaso balena. Uchivam statra suyodanena pravridakopa spurita dharena asatkrita satsprahniya sila shata shakarnanujaso balena. Synonyms. Iti, thus, uchivan, while speaking, tatra, there, suyodanena, by Duryodhana, pravridha, swollen with, kopa, anger, sphurita, flapping, adharena, lips, asatkrita, insulted, sat, respectable, sprahaniya silaha, desirable qualities, shata, vidura, sa, vid, karna, karna, anuja, younger brothers, sobalena, with Shakuni. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Abhay Charnarvind Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. While speaking thus, Vidura, whose personal character was esteemed by respectable persons, was insulted by Duryodhana, who was swollen with anger and whose lips were trembling. Duryodhana was in company with Karna, his younger brothers, and his maternal uncle, Shakuni. Purport. It is said that giving good counsel to a foolish person causes the fool to become angry, just as feeding milk to a snake only increases its venomous poison. Saint Vidura was so honorable that his character was looked up to by all respectable persons. But Duryodhana was so foolish that he dared to insult Vidura. This was due to his bad association with Shakuni, his maternal uncle, as well as with his friend Karna, who always encouraged Duryodhana in his nefarious acts. Om Jnana-timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namah Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Panchakalpatarubhesya Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. Hare Krishna, thank you. I seek blessings of all my superiors and all the friends and well-wishers. So here we're hearing Duryodhana's dealings with his uncle Vidura. And in the previous verse, I just read the translation, how Sukadev Goswami is enlightening us on position of Duryodhana. So the translation is like, you are maintaining offense personified, Duryodhana, as your infallible son, but he is envious of Lord Krishna, and because you are thus maintaining a non-devotee of Krishna, you are devoid of all auspicious qualities. Relieve yourself of this ill fortune as soon as possible and do good to the whole family. So Vidura, he is very affectionate to his brother Dhritarashtra. And all this time actually he was staying with Dhritarashtra in the palace just to help him get out of this difficult, precarious situation. Because like, this is actually Vidura speaking. He's saying to Dhritarashtra, you are maintaining this offense personified son. And we know like the Sanskrit word for son is putra, one who should, who can deliver the parents from going to a hellish condition. That's the actual meaning of the word putra. But then there is also the other side, is the mutra, means the urine. A son who is not qualified to deliver the parents is considered like worth almost like urine. That's what the Vedic scriptures say. Don't blame me. Yeah, when you hear statements like this, any sane person would think like, I would want to become a putra, not the other stuff. So, but as Srila Prabhupada mentions in the purport, when you give good counsel to a fool, they just become angry because they don't see the good intention behind the good counsel. They don't see the benefit in that instruction, and they just become angry at the person. Therefore, Vidura, because he had this affectionate relation with Dhritarashtra, because Dhritarashtra also liked Vidura, but he had like this unalloyed attachment for his foolish son Duryodhana, so he wasn't really able to take benefit of Vidura's association. So we will hear, after being insulted in this way, Vidura actually left the palace. And it's mentioned he didn't have any ill feeling against Duryodhana because he could understand what kind of person is Duryodhana is. And but it's mentioned, instead of being angry at Duryodhana, Vidura took this opportunity to go on a pilgrimage and just become absorbed in meditating on Krishna, performing devotional service, then dealing with these people who don't even care to listen to any good counsel he's been giving this all this time. So Vidura actually, instead of feeling insulted, he took this as an opportunity. Looks like I have better things to do than just dealing with all this stuff. So he went on a pilgrimage, and so I will share how we can look at the attitude, the dealings and behavior of Duryodhana and his father Dhritarashtra, and then we will see the dealings of Yudhishthir when he and the Pandavas when they welcomed Vidura on his return from his pilgrimage. And it's mentioned actually that the the reason Vidura returned was actually to help his brother Dhritarashtra, because he was still living with the Pandavas, whom he tried to harm in like so many ways. He was always approving Duryodhana for doing all these acts against the Pandavas and try harm them, kill them in different ways. So I'm gonna read some of the wonderful texts where Yudhishthir he welcomes, because we have heard few verses how Duryodhana insulted Vidura. So I was thinking we'll change the tone a little bit and hear something favorable about how the Yudhishthir welcomed, and we can see the different kinds of behaviors of these personalities. So this is from chapter 13 in the first canto, where titled Dhritarashtra quits home. Yeah. So there are some really nice points that we can take, and we can try practice them if possible, because they are pretty awesome how Yudhishthira and the Pandavas actually welcomed and appreciated Vidura's help and care and affection and protection that he was showing them all this time. So this is from text 8, and there is like a whole string of verses. Usually I learned in the Bhakti Shastra course in Mayapur, there is usually when there is some pastime, there is a whole string of verses which kind of covers the whole context. So it's good to read the whole string and get the gist of it, then just read one verse and try to figure out ourselves. So yeah, I read this like bunch of verses here. I'll just share some points that I got from there. So Maharaj Yudhishthir, he said, this is how Maharaj Yudhishthir speaking to Vidura when he come back to the palace at the Pandavas' place, says, "My uncle, do you remember how you always protected us along with our mother from all sorts of calamities? Your partiality, like the wings of a bird, saved us from poisoning and arson." So we know how Duryodhana he planned to kill the Pandavas by building this palace for them from shalak. I think it's the material which like catches fire very easily. And their plan was to burn them while they are sleeping. That was their plan. So I think it's in this purport here actually. It's mentioned that Dhritarashtra, he had this policy, like before the battle, they tried to kill Pandavas by some peaceful means. And this was one of the peaceful ideas they had. So you can see their ideas. Purochana is one of the ministers in the retinue of Dhritarashtra, and he was appointed to oversee this, that it actually happens, that the Pandavas get killed by fire in this palace. And the place is Varnavata. It's mentioned in the purport here. So, but then Yudhishthira, he's reminding Vidura, just see how you helped us through all these kind of difficulties. And actually, what happened is, because Vidura and Yudhishthira, they knew other languages. They could communicate in other languages also. So when Dhritarashtra, he said that to the Pandavas that, look, we build a nice palace for you. How wonderful is that? You have like an awesome place to go and live now. And of course, Pandavas knew their intention is always, they have some other thing going on in the background to harm them. But Yudhishthira was always, he could, because they always depending on Krishna. They are protected by Krishna. So they were never fearful of the plans Kauravas, Duryodhana and his father, they had against them. They would, because they are in power, so they would just be agreeable with them. So Yudhishthira was like, fine, we'll go there. But when they were leaving to go to the palace, because Vidura was also, he was the minister for Dhritarashtra, so he also saw Dhritarashtra actually asked Vidura, when he was telling Pandavas like this. So Vidura, what do you think? Is the palace good for sons of my brother? Is this a suitable place for them to go to? And this Vidura, he knew he's gonna tell the Pandavas later anyways what they are heading into. So he was like kind of approved it's a nice place, they should go and live there. So when Pandavas were living in the other language, Vidura communicated to them. So it's interesting, Srila Prabhupada, he actually gives, in the purport, he gives detail what actually Vidura said. So I'll just share. So Vidura tactfully gave instructions to the Pandavas about the future plan of Dhritarashtra. This is specifically described in the Mahabharata Adi Parva 114. He indirectly hinted, a weapon not made of steel or any other material element can be more than sharp to kill an enemy, and he who knows this is never killed. That is to say, he hinted that the party of the Pandavas was being sent to Varnavat to be killed, and thus he warned Yudhishthira to be very careful in their new residential palace. He also gave indications of fire and said that fire cannot extinguish the soul but can annihilate the material body. But one who protects the soul can live. Kunti could not follow such indirect conversations between Maharaj Yudhishthir and Vidur. And thus, when she inquired from her son of Vidura, it was understood that there was a hint of fire in the house where they were proceeding. Later on, you see, like Vidura is even like going further. He's living in the palace with Dhritarashtra, and in the palace, like all these things, it can be so difficult to, like, Duryodhana is already saying he's like an enemy living in our palace. He should go out. So here Vidura goes in disguise, and then what does he tell them? Later on, Vidura came in disguise to the Pandavas and informed them that the housekeeper was going to set fire to the house on the 14th night of the waning moon. Everything is planned. It was an intrigue of Dhritarashtra that the Pandavas might die altogether with their mother. And by his warning, the Pandavas escaped through a tunnel underneath the earth, so that their escape was also unknown to Dhritarashtra. So much so that after setting the fire, the Kauravas were so certain of death of the Pandavas that Dhritarashtra performed the last rites of death with great cheerfulness. So, A envious person, this is how they behave. They take pleasure in seeing others being harmed, or seeing others go down, than instead of being supportive and encouraging. Now, we know all the elders in the Kaurava family, they were very affectionate to the Pandavas. Just two persons, Duryodhana and Dhritarashtra. They were, is actually Duryodhana who was envious, but Dhritarashtra, he had like so much affection for his son, and he couldn't just be, he couldn't take proper decisions. He couldn't hear good counsel of Vidura, and he would always approve Duryodhana's acts. Of course, Duryodhana, he would come up with such evil ways to get Dhritarashtra to say yes. He would say, okay, well, we better die then, because if they are going to rule, we can't survive. And so he would force Dhritarashtra to agree also. It's mentioned actually, Duryodhana is evil personified, Kali personified. And there's no wonder he is able to behave in such ways. And not only that, as this verse says, his association was equally wonderful to encourage him in doing these kind of acts. I mean, look at his uncle Shakuni. He had his whole plan to destroy the whole Kaurava dynasty. That was Shakuni's plan. And his uncle, maternal uncle of Duryodhana. But you can see there is Dhritarashtra who has this like attachment for Duryodhana, and then here he is showing affection, thinking that he's helping his son, but he's not actually helping. But he don't realize out of foolishness he's doing this in ignorance. And then there is Shakuni. Shakuni is also, he has like, he seems like even worse than Dhritarashtra actually, because Dhritarashtra is doing it out of affection. Shakuni don't even have affection. His plan is just to destroy the whole dynasty. And then Karna, when you are in the bad party, Karna did have some good qualities, but he was envious of Arjuna also, because Arjuna was known as the best archer, and Karna, he was good too, but there is always this friction between Arjuna and Karna. So Karna was envious also, and we heard how it was Karna who encouraged disrobing of Draupadi in the palace, and of course Dushasana tried to carry that out. So that's only one way how they tried to kill. But what actually happened? So this is how we can see when someone is protected by Krishna, no matter how much one tries to harm them, whatever position they are in, they cannot harm them. So we see Pandavas, they were always protected. So Vidura, he gave them guidance how to get out of this difficult situation. And he told them, you can go through the tunnel, and there is the whole details on that. But what actually happened, this minister who was to oversee the whole thing, he actually got killed when the house did catch fire. It was this minister who was going to oversee the killing of Pandavas. He was the one who was killed. But also, interestingly enough, as an evidence, there was a forest lady. I can't remember the exact word. She was Nishida. Yeah, she was there, and she had 5 sons also. So one lady and 5 sons. So they were killed there in the fire. And that's how the Kauravas, Dhritarashtra's party, they were convinced that we finally managed to kill the Pandavas and everything should be peaceful and fine now. We can just rule without any disturbance. Um, but they didn't realize it's probably someone else who died, and their minister died also, who was to oversee. So we can also see, like, when we participate in these evil acts to harm some pious people, what it can lead to. It could instead in return harm us. So even supporting these kind of acts is dangerous consequences. What to talk about against these great devotees who were personally protected by Krishna all the time. Krishna was actually with them all the time whenever they were in difficulty. That's what Mother Kunti, she praised. When Krishna was about to leave, so Mother Kunti, she's like trying to get Krishna to stay with them. And there is a whole chapter on Queen Kunti's prayers, where actually Srila Prabhupada spoke quite a bit on those prayers also. But that's a whole other topic. I won't get into that. But yeah, this is how Vidura, he was trying to help them in his various ways. And Yudhishthira, he could appreciate that. And he's welcoming. And then now, just a few verses, how he welcomes Vidura. It's mentioned, he actually welcomes Vidura just like one would welcome the denizens of heavenly planets. Because we know in the palace of Pandavas, all kinds of demigods they would visit. And one of the reasons they would visit is because Krishna was living in that palace. So demigods, many times they would come in disguise, and other times they would come, in their whole as it is. So it's mentioned in the purport, Srila Prabhupada says, it's actually based on the spiritual culture. If one has that kind of spiritual culture, even the demigods would visit that place. But demigods would definitely not go to places like where these kind of people are planning such evil acts against the devotees of the Lord. Like last time I was mentioning, even Srila Prabhupada mentioned like presence of Narada Muni in the temple in London. So these things are possible in the purport. Srila Prabhupada mentions actually these things are possible even these days when that culture is maintained. So there is like lots of amazing points, but I want to read some of this, what Yudhishthira says. Yeah, so how Yudhishthira welcomes him, they actually felt like their life has returned, seeing Vidura come back to the palace. So, and then Vidura, he of course asks him, how he was maintaining himself, traveling all these places, says, but this is a very famous verse. I guess I'll just quote this and then I'll conclude with that. Bhavad Vidha Bhagavatas Tirtha Bhuta Swayam Vibho Tirthi Kurvanti Tirthani Swantasthena Gadabhrita. My Lord, devotees like your good self are verily holy places personified, because you carry the personality of Godhead within your heart. You turn all places into places of pilgrimage. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada is saying, so by their actions, the pure devotees of the Lord can render any place into a place of pilgrimage. And the holy places are worth the name only on their account. Such pure devotees are able to rectify the polluted atmosphere of any place. And what to speak of a holy place rendered unholy by the questionable actions of interested persons who try to adopt a professional life at the cost of reputation of a holy place. So we can see in our own life the example of Srila Prabhupada, how he brought Vrindavan and Mayapur to all over the world. And we ourselves sitting here at New Dwarka, we have this great fortune to have access to these embassies, Srila Prabhupada called them, embassies of the spiritual world. So we can meditate on these pastimes, and we can see for ourselves and try imbibe these devotional qualities, and definitely try to stay away from the qualities of Duryodhana. Yeah, it's Ekadasi day, so Ekadasi is definitely a good day to meditate on these kind of points and put some extra effort and energy. So thank you very much for your kind attention. Yeah, I guess we can just stop here. Maharaj has something to say.
Thank you for a very nice class.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Especially the Mahabharata is always fascinating, interesting, full of intrigue. But the question arises, how in this house of lack, which was you called a palace,
Yes.
it was very, very beautiful. It was called a house of lack because lac or lacquer is a substance which is combustible. So as soon as a little fire touches it, everything goes up in flames.
Yeah.
So the question comes, how could the Pandavas be killed in this, and who would do the killing? So the question, the plan was made actually by Duryodhana, and he communicated this plan to his servant Purochana, who was serving the Pandavas in this beautiful mansion. So Purochana knew that on a certain day he had to make sure that this house went up in flames. Interestingly, Vidura was not just another statesman. He also had some mystic powers. One of his mystic powers is that when he looked at a person's face, he could read their mind. And he was able to read the mind of Duryodhana and Dhritarashtra as to what that date was going to be that the Pandavas would be burned to death. He could read it. So he sent an emissary, or like a servant, over to the place, Vanavata, was that it? Yeah. So to tell the Pandavas that they must beware of that date. If they're not, they will be burned to death. So therefore the Pandavas knew for sure when their date was set for destruction. Purochana did not know that. He didn't know that the Pandavas knew this. No. Purochana simply thought, well, I've got my orders and I'm going to kill them. Yeah. Not so easy, because the Pandavas, as we know, are very shrewd, very knowledgeable, and very able. So what they did is that on the night that was supposed to be the night that the Pandavas were supposed to be killed, they arranged to have Purochana killed, burned by the fire, so that he could not do anything against the Pandavas, and then burn the whole house down and escape from it. And as you nicely mentioned before, there happened to have been a banquet that night, and there were 5 Nishidas and their mother. They had come to that banquet, and they went up in flames also. So when their bodies were found along with the woman, it was presumed that the woman was Kunti. They were burned completely, beyond recognition. So there was no question of, here's Bhima and here's Nakula, here's Sahadeva. It was this. So what happened was that because the Pandavas knew by Vidura got that message to them, Had Vidura not given that message to them, they would have been burned to death. But they knew that they were sitting ducks, as we say, and they got out of that mansion. They escaped completely, but Parochana, he got burned. The person who was supposed to burn them, he got burned. The palace went down, and the 5 bodies were found and were presumed to be, these are the Pandavas. But they weren't the Pandavas. Pandavas had already left early. They lit the fire, they lighted the fire, and left, went across the river. That's another thing Vidura did. He made sure there was a boat near the river, and the Pandavas and their mother would get into the boat, and the boat would cross the river.
Yes.
So the Pandavas and their mother escaped completely. Meanwhile, the fire was just blazing. So that was the way that the Pandavas were presumed to be dead because of those 5 bodies that had been found with the woman, which they was presumed to be Kunti. So therefore, for many, many months, a long time, it was thought the Pandavas were dead. It came to light later on that they were not dead at all. And the real story of how they escaped came about. And Vyasadeva, well, that's another story. But the main point is that how Vidura, because you're reading all about the glories and the greatness and the wonder and amazingness of Vidura, how he was able to get the knowledge to the Pandavas, save their lives, and at the same time make it appear that they were dead, and they were living in the forest for a very long time before it came to knowledge that they were still alive. I think it came at the when Draupadi was being offered for marriage. It was at that time that Arjun, who was disguised as a Brahmin, he won her, and then it became known that a Pandava won Draupadi. He's supposed to be dead. So
that's a whole different scene. Where that's a whole different scene.
They're still watching a ghost.
There they presented as if like, they missed them so much, and this was a whole act there by the Duryodhana party. Yeah. But we'll keep it for next time, Maharaj. But thank you. Okay. Maharaj has written a book on Mahabharata, so he definitely has lots more details on it. And I didn't know this part, like how Vidura, he had a boat arranged and the whole scene. So thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you. I think it's too late though. It's just real quick. I just had a question. I was just wondering, so like the Pandavas are so amazing. They're the best warriors basically in the universe. And like when you read the Battle of Kurukshetra, Arjuna would have like mystic powers or these mantras. It would describe that there would be a wall of arrows from all sides. You could just imagine like from above, from all sides, coming at him, a wall of arrows from like thousands of warriors. And he single-handedly would counteract all the arrows with his arrows and then kill the soldiers that were shooting the arrows at him. So, I mean, with someone with that much power, and what to speak of like Bhima and Yudhishthir, why would a fire be such a big deal? It would seem like they could just get out of a fire very easily, just chant some mantra or something.
Yeah, that's a good question. Because Arjuna could use some, but the plan was they are going to do it when they are in sleep, when they are not awake. So generally when you're in sleep, like in a different state of mind. That's what I would say. But I don't know, you have some other point that you had in mind?
The fire was supposed to come by surprise.
When they were sleeping.
It was, in other words, they were supposed to be burned during the time they were asleep. Therefore, they were not only inconvenienced, but disabled. They were not in a strong position. So that was the idea that the Pandavas would be burned during their sleep, but that never happened.
Yeah.
Because they were wide awake and they got out of the place.
Actually, like Maharaj was saying, the Pandavas, because they knew this is going to happen, so Bhima and Yudhishthir, actually they discussed that, hey, look, Instead of waiting for them, why don't we put it on fire and get out of here? So that's what they did. That's what how Maharaj was saying. They planned it themselves, and they put the palace on fire, and they got out of the tunnel. And these guys, instead of Pandavas being in sleep, these guys were in sleep, and they were done. Like this minister, this servant, and these ladies.
Thank you, Prabhu. It should also be mentioned that the Pandavas, yes, they were very great warriors, but they did have their equals and betters. Bhishma Dev was the best of all warriors. There was no one who could even come near him.
Yeah.
And everybody knew that. And therefore, the Kauravas were favored by the fact that Bhishma was on their side and not on the Pandavas' side. So also Karna was certainly the equal, and some even thought the better than Arjuna. There was a big contest between them. So there were some great warriors on the other side. Kripacharya was the warrior master. Yes, the Pandavas were great warriors, but it's not that the Kauravas didn't have great warriors also. Okay.
Thank you, Maharaj. I think we can stop here. Thank you very much. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thank you, Maharaj.